So what a great week for us to be doing this seminar. It's Children's Hospice Week, and we have the team from the Northern Ireland Children's Hospice here today. And I would like to thank Aisling and Julie for taking the time to come and share, I suppose, the work they've been doing and what they've learned through COVID and how they've continued to support families. So I'm just going to stop sharing now, and again, welcome ladies, and I'm going to hand over to yourselves. Just give me 2 ticks. There you go.
Okay, I'll just bring up our presentation here. Okay. Thank you very much, Alison and to Jenny, for allowing us to come along today. We really are very pleased to be able to share a little bit about Children's Hospice and Children's Hospice Week with you. My name is Aisling. I'm one of the social workers within the family support team. My colleague Julie is the team lead, and she will also be facilitating the second half of this presentation. We also have Andrina McCormack, who is one of our other social workers in the team, and Donna Neal, who is our family support worker. So I'm not sure if they can give you a wee wave if you can see them or not, but they will help us in answering some of the questions that you may have and giving you some more of the detail. So today our aim really is, as Alison has said, it's Children's Hospice Week, and we wanted to raise the profile of this very unique service within Northern Ireland and to share with you a little bit of the work that we've done. But also this year, as for everyone, has been a year of changes, and we wanted to reflect on actually how far we have come from this time last year, how we've adapted and what we have learned from COVID-19. So as part of this presentation, we will share some clips and some photographs and some videos with you. There's 2 things I want to say about that. Firstly, I suppose that some of the content you may find a little bit upsetting. Naturally, as a hospice, we are going to talk about children who die, and that can be very distressing for people, and I wouldn't take that away from you. So mind yourself, if there's some parts you'd rather not listen to or whatever, that's fine. But we also have to remember that there's joy in those short lives. So as upsetting as it can be, try to see the positive in that, and the positive that their family and hospice has helped to bring to those short lives and the difference that it has made, because there is a lot of joy and there is a lot of noise in this building a lot of times because of the joy that we bring. And then secondly, obviously Northern Ireland is a very small country, so there may be people that you recognise on these videos and on these pictures, and I suppose just as a gentle reminder around confidentiality, that maybe you're discovering things about people that you didn't know, and just to be mindful that that is their journey and their story, and just to be careful with what you do with that. Okay, so we do have presentation slides, and we'll talk through it. Like Alison has said, please make use of the chat function if you can. We're going to stop about midway through for questions as well. But if you feel like you might forget what it is you want to ask, drop it down in the chat and we'll pick it up from there. So for those who maybe palliative care is new to, palliative care for children and young people with life-limiting or life-threatening conditions is an active and total approach to care, from the point of diagnosis or recognition and throughout the child's life and death. And that's coming from the Together for Short Lives. So really what it focuses on is the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain or other problems or issues that they may experience. So they could be physical, psychosocial, or spiritual. And it really is about promoting the best quality life and care for every child with a life-limiting or life-threatening condition and their family. So it's really holistic care of the child with life-limiting condition, and is very active on a total approach. Key to this palliative care is giving families real choice. So around a choice of place of care, a choice of place of death, and a choice of emotional and bereavement support. So children and families are very much at the centre of this process. I'm sure a lot of us will be very familiar with adult palliative care, or at least the premise of adult palliative care, but there are some similarities and some very big differences around paediatric and adult palliative care. So people who work and care for ill children know that their needs are very different from those of adult patients. Children experience a variety of complex illnesses that are not seen in adults, and usually that's because they don't survive into adulthood. And palliative care can be helpful to all people living with serious illness and at any stage of their disease. This is particularly the case in children because they're resilient to illnesses in the way that adults aren't. When our organs are younger, when our bodies are younger, we can survive for a bit longer, and that's what we tend to see with children. And as anyone who has worked with children will know that they're not just mini adults. They really do have needs and rights and approaches that are significant and individual to them. So it does need to differ in some way. Children are growing and developing as they go through their illness. So unlike adults, when we're developed, we're grown, we've done all the growing that we're likely to do, a child's body is still continuing to develop and grow despite the fact that they have this coexisting illness. So therefore, all specialised medical care, including palliative care, needs to be tailored to their unique needs, and right through those stages from infanthood, children, right through to adolescence. Even illnesses that we see in adults that can occur in children need to be treated quite differently because of their unique physiology and their unique needs. And I suppose one of the differences that we see in paediatric cases is that illness and disease trajectory can span many years in some cases, which is quite unique for a lot of paediatric cases. So just to run you through some of the similarities and differences there. Palliative care, the similarities for adults and children is that palliative care can start at the beginning of an illness and be given along with treatment meant to cure. And you'll see that in slides to come, that sometimes we look at managing symptoms alongside trying to cure at the same time. So palliative care doesn't necessarily mean that that individual is imminently dying. It means that there's lots of options and scope that they can have to try and manage symptoms alongside some of the more curative treatments. Palliative care aims to improve quality of life by relieving distressing symptoms. And for adults and for children, that isn't just physical symptoms like we've already talked about. It's about spiritual, psychosocial, physical, mental, all of those things are part and parcel of palliative care. So the similarity again is that the team helps decision making and figure out care goals. For both children and adults, this should always be based on best interests. And palliative care can be medical care, but it also involves a team of different disciplines that includes doctors, nurses, social workers, OTs, and physiotherapists. That's the wee bit that's got cut off at the bottom there. But some of the differences that are unique for children's palliative care is that having a serious illness is not a normal condition for most children. So this presents a unique challenge for caring for children and their families. I wouldn't say that having a serious illness is normal for adults, but if you think about the statistics around cancer, they say that for adults, 1 in 2 of us are going to get cancer in our lifetime. That statistic doesn't correlate to children. So, there are things that are very different. And we think about the natural order of life and those ideas that we have about who we think would be sick. Children don't tend to feature in that. Medical decisions for young people are usually made by their family caregivers. Adult patients may usually make their own decisions. Obviously, there's differences in that in terms of the deprivation of liberty legislation that has come out through the Mental Capacity Act and things like that. But usually a child isn't able to give consent at a very young age for any of the treatment or procedures that they may use. So we're very much looking to parents for consent, whereas in an adult patient, that doesn't happen. But again, it always should be based on best interest, and the medical team will usually try and lead those discussions. And paediatric palliative care can also involve a play therapist, child life therapist, and/or behavioural specialist, which is something very different and very unique to children's palliative care. Okay, so in terms of the scale of palliative care needs, it's a very difficult one to try and quantify. However, we're very lucky that in 2020 there was some research carried out by the Martin House Research Centre with the University of York, who conducted some research to ascertain the number of children across the UK who did have life-limiting or life-threatening conditions. So it was focused on the UK, it was focused I think on England in particular. However, from that they were able to estimate the prevalence in Northern Ireland and make predictions for the numbers likely to be impacted by 2030, which isn't that far away in terms of what we're talking about in timescales. So this is quite a complicated but simple graph at the same time, but basically what it is telling us, so this is for Northern Ireland specifically. So research has indicated that there are approximately 2,500 babies, children and young people under the age of 18 who have a life-limiting or life-threatening condition in Northern Ireland. But by 2030, the research is suggesting that this number will rise to between 2,600 and 2,800, which is a prevalence of between 52 and 56 per 10,000. So that is quite a significant number. And I suppose it's important that we think about what is going to happen next, because there's lots of impacts in terms of service provision and need that needs to be met. So what the research also tells us is that the prevalence of life-limiting and palliative conditions is higher in boys than girls. The prevalence of life-limiting condition was highest for congenital abnormalities. Prevalence is by far the greatest in babies under 1 year of age, as is the number of deaths. So unfortunately, it means that, you know, the majority of children who are diagnosed with a life-limiting or palliative condition are under 1, and therefore the greatest amount of deaths occurs in that age range too. The number of young people with life-limiting conditions living to age 19 is increasing. So that's good. Some of these conditions are no longer limited to childhood if they're reaching 19. The prevalence of life-limiting conditions is highest among the most deprived populations of the group, of the most deprived groups of the population, apologies, and the prevalence of life-limiting conditions is increasing. So it's great that the number of young people with life-limiting conditions living to 19 is increasing. However, that does have an impact then on adult palliative care, because a lot of those children, when they reach 18, transition through to adult services, and then they do die in their 20s. So although they're not limited to childhood, they're very limited to early adulthood. Okay, when we think about the prevalence of life-limited condition being highest in the most deprived groups of the population, there's a lot of other factors to consider there, because they're perhaps the groups that are least able to afford the financial impact of caring for a child with complex conditions, all that traveling for appointments, all that specialised care, adaptation to housing, all of those things that need to be considered. So the prevalence of life-limiting condition is increasing, and that's across all areas of the UK. And there's probably a number of reasons for that. Better diagnosis, better interventions, and better support for families. We have more techniques in terms of artificial feeding, enteral feeding, all of those things that may actually expand on somebody's time frame and their prognosis. But how does that impact on palliative care services going forward? And I suppose this isn't a service that is commissioned every year or every 2 years. We can only commission based on the need at that time. However, the fact that more seriously ill children are living longer is cause for celebration. There's no two ways about that. It's great that more children are living longer. However, there is an urgent need then to ensure that children's palliative care services are properly mapped, funded and planned and delivered then to ensure that those families and their children can live life to the full. So this is also true on a wider systems basis, not just unique to children's hospice or palliative care services, because those children are likely to need children's disability social work input. They're likely to need direct payments. They're likely going to need specialist school provision. They're likely going to need access to physios and OTs. They're likely going to need specialist equipment. They're likely going to need a bus transfer to school. They're going to need respite. They're going to need support packages. And all of these things need to be properly mapped and planned for, so that we're not in a position where actually we've identified a need but have no method of delivering the needs or the services to meet those people. And I think even with those gradual hundreds of increases in a year, that by 2030, eventually it's going to meet much higher numbers, and we as service and commissioners need to move forward in the same vein. Okay, so then what is the role of Children's Hospice Service? So it's all well and good knowing what the need is, but what do we do about it? So there is quite a relationship between palliative care and treatments aimed at cure or prolonging life. So this is just a wee infographic to show you the different stages that it can happen. So for some cases, it's purely palliative, and we know from the time of perhaps 20-week scan, we know from birth, and we know from when an accident occurs that actually, or an illness occurs, that there's no cure possible, and this is always going to be a palliative case. However, for some people, that curve isn't quite so neat, and that there are times when there's highly technical treatments that are offered, which perhaps expands the chances of a cure working or prolonging life. But then there are also those where it's up and down a little bit more. There are times then when the first role is to try and cure and to give treatment. However, then it becomes apparent that the illness is no longer curable, and palliative care kicks in then. So I suppose there's no right or wrong, but it just varies depending on the individual and on their circumstances and what the family wish for too. I mean, it's not very easy to tell a family that there's nothing more that they can do to try and cure their child. How we as a children's hospice operate then is looking at what we call the ACT categories, and these have been created by the Together for Short Lives, which is an overarching lobbying and policy group and funding group, I suppose, for children's palliative care services, which is nationwide, and to help us in making sure we reach the most needy children, and that those children that we provide services to are the right ones. They've created these categories, so it's just for a little bit of information to show you what they categorize. So in some cases, I suppose you'd be thinking, like in category 1, perhaps some of those children living with cancer, that there are curative treatment that could be feasible, but it can fail. Category 2, conditions where premature death is inevitable, would be a lot of those sort of genetic conditions, I suppose, so like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, those sort of conditions. Category 3 are conditions which are progressive without curative treatment options. So for example, children who have Batten's disease. And then category 4 is irreversible but non-progressive conditions causing severe disability, leading to susceptibility to health conditions and likelihood of premature death. So those would be those children perhaps who have things like severe cerebral palsy, perhaps multiple disabilities, such as an acquired brain injury or spinal trauma, epilepsy, I suppose, severe epilepsy, and its associated difficulties can sometimes fall into that categories too. So those are the category of children where we think, yes, there's a high level of need here. We're not necessarily sure that condition will ultimately end their life, but it is likely that some of those associated vulnerabilities may. So we would find that a lot of these children perhaps die of chest infections and things like that any other child may survive, but because they do have other coexisting comorbidities, I suppose, that it makes it more difficult for them. So what is a children's hospice then? So Children's Hospice is both a centre and an ethos of care and a way of providing care for babies, children and young people from birth to 18. Services vary depending on the provider. However, many offer a wide range of specialist services for children with life-limiting and life-threatening conditions. So these may include daycare, hospice at home, respite or what we would call supported short breaks, advanced care planning, linking in with a key worker, end-of-life care, bereavement support and education. So I'm just going to run you through a little bit of what Northern Ireland Children's Hospice offer. So this is our centre in Glengormley and we call it Horizon House, and it is a beautiful facility. Unfortunately, at the minute, we're not able to facilitate visitors because we obviously have a very, very vulnerable group of young people that use our services. But hopefully in time, we'll be able to host a few of you to come up and have a look around and see our wonderful centre and what we have on offer. But I suppose this is only a small part of what we do because this is what is centre based, but we cover the whole of Northern Ireland in terms of our outreach programmes too. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a quick clip of one of our families who actively use hospice services at the minute, and let you hear a little bit about what their experience with hospice has been so far.
I have 3 kids. I have Jay, who's 9, I have Owen, who's 6, and I have Anya, who's 4. And Owen, obviously our middle little boy, he has a lot of medical needs, a lot of stuff going on. So he's partially sighted, he's got hearing loss, he has heart conditions, he's tube fed 100%, and he has probably his main issue is he has a tracheostomy, so he has an artificial airway. All of this comes from partly he has a very, very rare genetic syndrome called cri de chat syndrome. It means cry of the cat in French, and apparently comes from all the kids who have this syndrome have a very high-pitched cry. Unfortunately, we have never heard Owen cry. He's never made any sound at all because the tracheostomy bypasses his vocal cords. So he's never made any sound. Apparently he cried once in hospital during a trachea change, and I was so traumatized during the trachea change that I didn't notice that he was actually crying. So I regret that actually, that I didn't hear his wee cry. When Owen came home from hospital, it was very intense. You know, we had never spent any great amount of time with him on our own. And suddenly we were on our own 24/7 with this baby who absolutely needed us for everything, and who couldn't even cry to tell us that he needed us. It was quite terrifying. When the community nurse talked about hospice and help and support and things, I thought, well, I can't turn this down. I can't ask for help, ask for support, and then get it and say no. She came out to meet me. She talked to me about the hospice. It all sounded lovely, but I was still very skeptical. So she said, come and see. So myself and John visited the hospice one afternoon, and I felt sick to my stomach going through those doors. I really did. I was so nervous, and it was beautiful. It was so lovely. I got such a nice feeling the minute that I walked through those doors. I felt welcome and I felt really content. We didn't have Owen with us. Actually, he was at home with carers that day. But I felt really at home in some weird way. And we came out and we got into John's car, and he said, well, what did you think? And I loved it. I really loved it. And he said he did too. It's somewhere that we can all have fun together, and where we get to have fun with Owen without having to do the tough stuff. You know, Owen is sick quite a lot. He can be, on a bad day, he could be sick 20 or 30 times a day. We're playing together, and if he's sick, someone else takes him away and gets him sorted out and cleaned up. And just for that one day or those 2 days where I don't have to do that, you know, where I can enjoy playing with them and enjoy the fun stuff and the stuff that it's meant to be like being a mum to a 6-year-old. We get to do things like go swimming. The only time we've ever been able to take Owen swimming has been at the hospice. He can't go to a normal pool, so that's really quite special when the 5 of us can get in the pool together and have fun. And it's normal, it's what other families do, but what we can't. So in the hospice we feel more like a normal family than we do outside of hospice.
Okay, so that was our lovely O'Neill family, and talking a little bit about what hospice means to them and what they offer. And I think what Anne-Marie, the mummy, was talking about there, it's very true for a lot of our families. As soon as they hear the word hospice, they are like, oh no, not for me, we're not there, I don't want to think about that. But actually, when they come here, they realize that isn't a clinical space, it's not like hospital. It's actually a very homely place. Of course, unfortunately, there does need to be some of those clinical things like suction machines and oxygen and hoists and things like that, but that's okay, because there's also lots of places which, you know, are just like your home, and that it's some place that families can come and relax. So I suppose one of the most utilized part of our service is in-house services. So that ranges from day cases and supported short breaks right through to young people who come here for end-of-life care or perhaps care after death as well. So it's quite unique. It is the only children's hospice within Northern Ireland, and it is a nurse-led unit. So our lovely nurses, there's a team of nurses and healthcare assistants who operate actually from director level down. We are nurse led, but there is a daily GP input. So if there's any clinical concerns with a child, there is a GP on hand who is familiar with the children. I think there's a group of 6 of them or whatever who rotate through and cover for us. And they come in daily to review the children, and they can then prescribe anything that they may need. So we offer supported short breaks for children and the family. Unfortunately, at the minute, due to the COVID restrictions, we aren't able to have very many families visiting, but the children do still come for those who are okay to send their children by themselves, and they have a plethora of things to do that will entertain them. And I suppose the focus of our supported short breaks is fun and memory making. So you can see some of the facilities that we have here. It's a 10-bedded unit, so we have the capacity to take 10 children. We tend not to run at the full 10, but we are a very busy unit. So you can see here we have a multisensory room, which is fantastic and amazing. And I'm not sure if you can see if my mouse is on top of that there. This is our multisensory room here, and this big white thing is a heated water bed. So sometimes there's a bit of a queue for the kids to get on because the staff are having a wee relax on there. So there's everything and anything you could imagine in that multi-sensory room, and we're so lucky that we have very generous funders who fund pieces of equipment, and there's grants that we can get to make this state of the art, and it is amazing. We then have an art room, which you can see over to the left of the screen, and then underneath that is also some of the work that our children and their siblings have produced. So usually when a child has been in for a stay in-house, they will go home with pieces of artwork, usually handprints and footprints, which families can use to chart how their child is growing and things like that. But you can also see there's a very messy one there, which was syringe painting. So, I mean, you need to send in a couple of spare pairs of clothes, I suppose, when they go into the artwork room, but it's lovely and very well utilised. We then have the den, which is the green walls in the room just at the bottom of the screen there. And that's a space that our music therapist would use. So there's lots of musical instruments available to the children. There's also every imaginable game console you could possibly want. Lots and lots of games are provided. There's also DVDs. There's a big pull down screen for families to enjoy movie night. So there's lots of space in there for them to enjoy. Lots of bean bags so that the children can have some time out of their wheelchairs and on their beds and onto the bean bag. We then also have a hydrotherapy pool. So there are some people who would use our service just to access, and they access the pool. That's what they want from the service. So it's a very warm pool. Some of the local special educational schools would come in to use that facility as well. Unfortunately, at the minute, it is closed due to COVID and just the practicalities and logistics of making sure that everybody is as safe as possible. So for the minute, that's not operational, but definitely something that we're working on to try and get working again. So it's a heated pool. Like Anne-Marie was saying in the video, families aren't always able to take their children to public pools. First of all, because it's freezing, or second of all, because of their needs, you know, it can be quite difficult. So there's our physiotherapists get in the water with the families and can do lots of hydrotherapy with the children. And that can be really useful for pain relief because they have that freedom of movement that they wouldn't usually. We also then have parents accommodation. So usually if a child is coming in-house, we have space for up to 4 families to come with them. Some parents choose to come with their children for the first few stays, and then they take the opportunity really to just have some downtime and some good respite, maybe go out themselves for a meal or a couple of drinks or whatever it is that they want, and they choose to stay at home. And really we encourage either. We love to have the families here, but also if they feel they need a break and they need to be hands off, then that's quite okay too. The children will usually still stay with us in the 10-bedded unit. Siblings are usually welcome as well. Obviously everything's a bit up in the air with COVID, but that's definitely our plan to get that started. So you see our lovely Caroline, who's the catering manager, holding a plate of scones. The food in here is amazing, and that's one thing that the families really do focus on, is the fact that they don't have to cook for themselves. The food is lovely. It's home cooked food. It's not being bought in. They cook fresh every day, and nothing is too much trouble for that catering team. And there's always goodies about as well. You just have to ask them if you need a piece of chocolate or something. They're very good. And that feeling of being at home and being well cared for is something that our catering team really do provide. And then children also have access to specialist physiotherapists while they're here. We have a number on staff who are able to do that specialist physiotherapy that our children would tend to need on a daily basis. So alongside our supported short breaks, then we also offer emergency stays. So say if the family had another bereavement, or mum or dad was taken ill, usually we work really hard to try and get the young person in so that they don't have an additional worry or burden on them, that they know that they can send us for a number of days and we will look after them, freeing them up to do whatever is needed. We do step-up care, so we do specialist symptom management. So if some pain needs sorted, or a child's maybe a bit out of sorts, or whatever's going on, it can't just be managed at home, or they need some specialist input, the children can come in to us for that specialist service and perhaps avoid going to hospital then with that specialist step-up care. And then obviously being a hospice, unfortunately, we do end-of-life care as well. So sometimes it's that a child will come in from home having been deteriorating. Sometimes they will come from hospital when it's clear that they're not going to live, or they will come from pediatric intensive care and and their life support can be stopped here. And I suppose it's a more homely environment under normal circumstances. As many people as they want can be here, which can't always be facilitated in a hospital environment. And then some of those families will remain here for care after death. So they'll be in our lovely suite, which we call the Haven, and we would have funeral services and things from here. And that's a very important part of the service. Obviously we don't have pictures of that, but that does go on here. But one of the magical things about Horizon House is that despite the fact you may have a family who are here under very, very sad circumstances, that actually other families don't know about it. We can shield and screen, and obviously everybody is in the same boat and has the same fears for their children when they come here, and are very respectful of that. And then obviously our support then will continue after the child has passed away. Okay. So some of our more outreach services then, I suppose, are our community services. So we have community hospice nurse specialists and children's hospice nurse specialists who, there's one in each trust area, and they will carry an active caseload of children who perhaps need a little bit more support. So perhaps they'd be a little bit less well and a little bit more complex. So they would oversee their care within the community. They liaise with other professionals in the community and sort of manage that process and who needs to do what. And they support care at home through medicine management, pain relief techniques, ongoing specialist palliative care, and family support. And then in some trust areas, we have access to hospice at home. So for those families who perhaps don't come in-house very often, or perhaps just need a little bit extra care at home, we have nurses and healthcare assistants who will provide respite shifts within the community. So they will go out to the family's home and help look after the child and give the mum and dad or grannies or whoever it is a little bit of a break and a little bit of support at home. So I suppose it is only just for the child with hospice needs, but it frees mum and dad up or whoever to go and spend time with other children or whatever it is they need to do. We then have our hospital services. So we have a wonderful nurse based in the Royal, the Sick Children's Hospital, called Rosie, and she is the palliative and life limited services nurse. So she is in the Royal to be an active link between those children with life limiting and palliative conditions and hospice. It's because we find sometimes that there are children, I mean, there's 2,500 children out there, we don't know who they all are. And sometimes that link isn't easily made. So having somebody in that hospital environment who also works between the neonatal ward and as well in maternity can really be a really good link to help introduce the idea of hospice and make it sound less daunting for our families. And as part of that commissioning process, we were funded for a specialist bed within hospice, which is called I'm Coming Home. So for some kids, that is a step down from hospital. So perhaps they've been in hospital for a while, their care needs have changed, and perhaps parents need to be trained up and feel confident in using these new interventions that they need to do for their children, so they can come here while that process is happening, or perhaps they're looking for a care bed or a care provider, making out, all of those things. And then for some children, the I'm Coming Home bed is step down from hospital to end of life care, and where the family have chosen to come over here. So what I'm going to show you next is a story of a family who were identified through that PAL service that Rosie had a really good link with, and then came over to Northern Ireland Hospice, Children's Hospice, to Horizon House for end of life care.
Considering what he went through, he was such a positive character. Caleb had a massive brain tumour just behind his eye on the optic nerve. After the MRI, we were taken into a room, and that's when we seen the scans are shot, and I asked the doctor, is he going to live or die? To get the answer, we don't know.
Yeah, it was very tough in the family as a whole, because obviously we have older children as well, so we were away from them a lot of the time, because Caleb obviously was in such bad shape that we didn't know whether he was going to live or die, so we were at the hospital the majority of the time, which affected the other kids as well.
When you get a terminal diagnosis, it throws your whole world upside down. It's a nightmare. You kind of feel like you need to wake up. You're in shock, you're numb, you're angry, you're distressed. We met Rosie Hannah on the oncology ward. She sat and explained to us about the facilities and stuff and the care that could help us, and the fact that it would be more comfortable to have Caleb in a more relaxed, less clinical setting. The I'm Coming Home bed was very beneficial to us, because it meant when we came over here we were very exhausted. You see, going through something like this that emotionally drains you, see being able to have the facilities like that to get your head in, to be near your child, or to be able to go and make a quick coffee or a bite to eat.
And being able to have the kids here as well, fantastic, without it was all crammed into one tiny room. you know, the kids were able to come here. It was more relaxed for them. We were able to spend proper time in their villa rather than sort of being rushed. It's good having situated with his family and having, you know, with the rest of the kids as well, a wee bit of normality.
If you have to come here, it is the best place to come. It helps build the family unit again. It helps understanding what the process is like, because when you're going through a palliative process and you're coming to that end stage, you don't know what to expect or how to expect it or how to deal with it emotionally, mentally and physically.
Caleb wasn't really very stable at that point, and to get him over here with no hiccups was fantastic. And then what they done here for him was unbelievable. You know, I couldn't be more thankful to him.
We were a family again.
Yeah.
So that was our wonderful Caleb, he was a real character. You'll have noticed in there that there was a little stone that had his name on it. So whenever a child passes away who is known to the service, they are given the option to have a stone in our memory garden. And I suppose one of the most important things about that is we put down their date of birth, because we don't put down their date of death, we put down when they were born, because that was the start of their story, and families really get a lot of comfort and joy out of placing that stone and coming up to visit. So that talked a little bit about some of the support that they found through the I'm Coming Home bed. Another aspect of the service then is the family support team, which we are the family support team, the four of us here. So when a child in the family is diagnosed with life-limiting or life-threatening condition, it can affect the entire family unit, and really that goes without saying. It can just be devastating and just turn their world on end. So the family support service offers specialist support to help families cope with disruption to family life and minimise the long-term impact on the family's emotional well-being. The family support service is for children and young people and their families when the child has been diagnosed with life-limiting or life-threatening condition. So it isn't a support service that anyone can access. It is unique to the Children's Hospice. And a family might decide that individual members would benefit from the service, or perhaps the whole family would benefit from using the service together. So we would support families in all sorts of different combinations. Maybe we do a bit of work with the sibling, perhaps we're doing a bit of work with mum, sometimes we'll do a bit of work with dad, sometimes it's all together. And on occasion, we are fortunate enough to be able to do some work with the child that has hospice needs themselves, if it's appropriate that we can do that. And the girls have some wonderful examples of the work that they have done with those children and are continuing today. So that's just a little bit more about our family support service. I mean, naturally, we think we are the most important service of the lot, and I think probably NISCC would agree, but it's a real privilege, it's a real niche in social work and social care, and we're very proud of the service that we have been able to develop and to continue to run to support families. So this is a wee bit of some of the particular types of support that we offer. So we do family support sibling groups. So that's children who have a brother or sister who still actively uses the Children's Hospice services. We would run regular meetings, events and groups for those children to come together, because sometimes they can feel very isolated. They don't know anybody else who has a sibling with a disability or that is life limited. So it's nice to be able to bring them together, and also to have a service specifically for them, because they're very used to their brother or sister having people coming out to them, but they don't get that. So we offer that service specifically for them, and they love it. Coffee mornings is something that we offer, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we've adapted these services during COVID, but the coffee mornings were great. It was mainly mums that would come along, mums and grannies, and we'd hold them across Northern Ireland, and just one morning a month they would come along, have a cup of coffee and just chat. And it was a really great way of getting some information across for them to make connections with each other, to vent about what was going on, and also to hear about what was happening within hospice. We offer family fun and activity days, which are just an opportunity to get our families together to meet each other and have a fun day out. An adult carers group, we offer therapeutic one-to-one work, counselling service for adults, a parent and talk group, and Facebook support groups. But I suppose it's all well and good me telling you about these, but I'm going to introduce you to Kerry and Gordon, who are one of our families that are actively using the service at the minute, when they talk a little bit about the support that they have been offered through Children's Hospice. Now, I've had a bit of sound issues with this one, so well, if you can't hear it, Alison, would you just, if you can hear it, would you give me a thumbs up? Would that be okay?
Was born at 37 plus 2 weeks, and he was a placenta abruption. So he was born not breathing and ended up in neonatal intensive care. And because of what he suffered, he ended up with brain damage, which has caused a lot of issues for Ben. So Ben is nil by mouth, and he is fed into his bowel. He is profoundly deaf in both ears. He is severely visually impaired. He has epilepsy. He has severe dystonia. He has cerebral palsy, and he's non-mobile and needs 24-hour round-the-clock care. But he's a happy wee guy. So it was quite easy the first couple of weeks, and then as the weeks get in, it's starting to get harder, because the longer it goes on, we're thinking in the next couple of months we're heading back into winter again, and we're going to be locked down ourselves
anyway
to keep them safe. So it's hard. So it is, and especially when you see the sunshine and stuff, you just want to make a picnic and go out. And it's like being in a jail. The families with children like them who are under hospice care have been forgotten about somewhat by the media and the daily briefings and everything, because the rule is it doesn't affect children, so we're okay. But my point is, a cold to these boys and girls is life threatening, never mind taking a chance of having a fast. It's been amazing. I have to say that we have the best family support worker in the world. So we have a lovely lady called Andrina, who has been there at the end of the phone, the end of the text message, and has made it 1,000% clear to us that we can contact her at any time for anything, and has been there to be a shoulder to cry on through the phone and through video chat, to help us with our nerves and to give us that weakness that we're doing well, we're doing good. And I think we would be lost without her, because she has been the rock to keep us going through this. And I couldn't imagine not having Andrina in our lives. Big heart.
Big heart.
Yeah.
I think she was 50-50 on that birthday this year. I'm sorry.
So through Andrina and the hospice, were able to arrange for Santa to come and visit Ben at home, which was an experience that will stay with us for the rest of our lives. To see Ben interact with Santa, to see how well Santa was with Ben, and the smile he was getting, and us all being here as a family, and Andrina was with us too, and we were getting pictures and all taken, and we had a lovely meal from the local hotel, which Andrina had set up. We had a big Christmas dinner and stuff. Memories like that are priceless, and oh my God, we never forget that. You know, that was brilliant.
So I think that's a really nice example of the impact that our family support service can have on a family. I don't think Ben had ever met Santa Claus before. He'd never been well enough to go to the shopping centre or to any of those things to meet Santa, and I think that was one of the first times that he had met Santa, and that our wonderful Andrina had made that possible for them. When the daddy laughed, it's not very clear all the time. He said, I'm going to give her 50 quid. She's going to give us 50 quid for that. She's yet to make good on that promise, but it just shows you the relationship that they have and how important the family support service is to that family, and the relationship that we've been able, Andrina and now Donna is involved as well, has been able to make for that family. It's wonderful. And there's a real sense of freedom in the work that we can do sometimes, which is lovely. So then care after death and bereavement support. Some children and families travel to or remain in Horizon House for care after death. So they may come here and die here, or they may die somewhere else and come here to be cared for afterwards. And we call that care after death. So bereavement support then is offered to the whole family for up to 2 years. Now we're flexible on that. Obviously, we're not just going to cut them loose, but tends to be for up to 2 years. And usually it's the key worker who is best known to that family that will do the bereavement support. We also offer parent and bereavement support groups. So we meet monthly at the minute with those and give parents a space and siblings a space to talk about what life is like now and how things are going. We have a special pre-Christmas bereavement day. So we invite all the parents and families who have been bereaved since last Christmas to come along to talk about how Christmas is going to be different for them this year and what things are going to change, and to give them some strategies and techniques to use. A lot of families have a lot of anxiety about what Christmas is going to be like and how different it will be. So we give them the opportunity to talk about that. And then the annual Forget Me Not service is something that we run obviously annually. And that's an opportunity for anyone who has been connected with Children's Hospice, doesn't matter how long ago that their child died, they're still invited to come up. And that's it's non-denominational. It's more like a reflective service, and it's a chance for them to revisit us and to have a little look around the memory garden, to speak to people that maybe still work here, speak to people that they knew, and a chance to just dedicate the day to their child again. And so you can see some of the work that we have completed with children and families in to give you a flavour of the bereavement support that we offer. And so next up is the final clip. You'll be pleased to hear you're not going to hear from me for much longer. So our next clip is from a family of little baby Lou, who came to us for care after death and has made use of our bereavement support.
Hello, my name's Andrina McCormack and I'm one of the social workers here at the Northern Ireland Children's Hospice. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our care after death service and introduce you to a young man called Lou. We met Lou when we got a call from the Royal Hospital. One of the consultants, Marie McGinn, had spoken to the family about Lou and some of the services that hospice may be able to provide. Jenny Thompson and I went to meet with the family at this difficult time. Lou passed away later that evening, and the family had said they would like to come to hospice for care after death. We accompanied the family to here at hospice and provided them with an opportunity to make some memories with Lou and spend some time together. We were able to support a wider family emotionally at that difficult time and provide support to Natasha and Connor, both practical and emotional. We were able to organise baby Lou's funeral service as the family had requested to be here at hospice. I have the privilege of continuing to support Natasha and Connor on their journey.
Yeah, Lou is our baby boy. He loves the drama, even from the day he was born. Lou was born at 25+4 gestation, so he was very early, and he sort of took us all by surprise. And I found out when he was born that it had a placental abruption, and that is what caused me to go into labour so early. So we had a pretty turbulent trip in the neonatal units. We battled, so we had sepsis, pneumonia, ROP, NEC, like everything. But we were very, very lucky that he got through it. And we got him home on the 29th of August, I think it was. And we had 2 weeks at home, and we could be what I had imagined motherhood and parenthood to be. We were home for about 10 days whenever he had his first readmission into hospital. On a children's ward for 4 days, and then we got home and we thought, right, that's it, no more admissions. But 4 days later, we ended up going back in. We were kind of preparing, weren't we, for like a possible heart operation, because we knew about the holes in the heart. So we prepared ourselves for some kind of news, but we hadn't prepared ourselves for the diagnosis that we got. Sadly, the condition was just too big for him, and he passed away on November 28th, 2019. And if we hadn't been contacted by the hospice, then Lee would have passed and we just would have went home, and all of our families would have went to separate houses, and we would have had to try and come to terms with what had happened, you know, alone. It allowed our family to all be together, because obviously hospital visiting wouldn't really allow. So there was family there who had never held Lou before, even though he was almost 8 months old, who had never really met him. And they give us this beautiful room, which had like Lou's room on the front of it, which I just thought was so beautiful. It was like you had like a second life after he passed, where we could be together as a family. We could do all these things together that, you know, we missed out on. That wouldn't have been possible, you know, had the hospice and their services not came to us.
It is I think it's an essential service.
Yeah.
I think for people who find themselves in a position like us, because it really does help start that process of coming to terms with the loss of a child. And it's not just in those services at that time, but it's also the aftercare of that. Once you do leave the hospice, you're part of the hospice family forever.
Definitely helped. Well, it definitely helped me heal and help my family heal, having those last memories, where the last memories wasn't in, you know, a sterile room with machines and full of clinical and scary, but it was in this beautiful home environment where we could have everyone together and, as you say, celebrate his short but really special life.
So that was the beautiful baby Lou. He always makes me smile, those wee cheeks, you could just pinch them. So we're sort of at the halfway point, and I'm going to hand over to Julie now, but I'm wondering if anybody has any questions so far. I see there's one thing in the chat box. Let's have a look. Nope. Thanks, Jenny. Does anybody have any questions at the minute?
So I think I'm starting to get back by the films and the impact they have.
Oh, we had a bit of feedback there. What does it mean?
Let's see, is that the crackling away? No, I was just saying how powerful the films are, and they really make the presentation, I suppose, more to think about, Aisling, you know.
Oh, apologies, folks. I don't know why my videos just went off there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you. Julie, I can see your presentation.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, come on. No. Sorry, I didn't get that to go on the slideshow. I'll get that away.
Technology, don't you love it?
It needs to go away. I don't know. Sorry, folks. Sorry, it's just frozen here a wee second. Alison, would it be okay if I just work from the screen like this rather than hold people up?
Yeah, I think I can see it fine. It's grand, yes.
Yeah, is that okay? Apologies, just the connection seems to be a bit slow. So yeah, I suppose I just want to say thanks to everybody for their patience so far. I'm conscious of the time, so there might be a few of my video clips that I just have to cut short, because I know obviously people will be quite busy and will have other things to go on to, but I know, Alison, that you will be sharing the slides on the NISC platform, so there will be opportunities for the participants to come back and view the full video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just, I suppose Aisling and Alison have already pointed out that this is an important week for us, because it is Children's Hospice Week. And really that's the only week in the year that's dedicated to raising awareness and funds for children's hospices across the UK and palliative care services. Together for Short Lives is the UK-wide registered charity for children's palliative care services, and every Children's Hospice Week they would offer a theme, and this year the theme is Push to the Limits, really to highlight and emphasise that children's hospice services have been pushed to the limits throughout the global pandemic, as well as families caring for children with a life-limiting or life-threatening condition. And then in addition to that, our own specific theme here in the Northern Ireland Children's Hospice is that we're always there for families, and really, despite the challenges that the pandemic has brought, we have continued to commit ourselves to providing high quality palliative care. And as you've heard from some of the families already, that has been of real benefit to them in coping with these challenging times. And I suppose just following on then with the theme of Push to the Limits, there was some quite interesting research that came out quite recently, just in relation to specifically mothers caring for children with life-limiting conditions. And really the research showed that mothers caring for children with life-limiting or life-threatening conditions were much more likely to develop both serious physical and mental health problems, and also to die a premature death. So that was quite, I suppose, not surprising to us, considering the challenges that we know families face, but quite concerning in modern day society. And I suppose the most concerning aspect of that is that some of these health outcomes or adverse health outcomes are completely preventable with the right investment and support given to paediatric palliative care services. And you can see the research also highlighted just that mothers caring for serious ill children are significantly higher risk of things like depression, anxiety, or other serious mental illness, as well as physical health issues such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension. And just to kind of bring that a bit to life, actually, we took this article, this piece of research, to one of our recent parent support groups and just asked the mothers in that group to comment. And quite kindly, one of the mothers, Karen, agreed to allow us to kind of share her feedback in terms of relating to the article and the findings. And really what Karen has said is that, you know, in reflection, following the results of the research, they find themselves as a family of 5, 2 parents pretty broken, both parents feeling like they've suffered cares, compassion fatigue, burnout, and have both experienced poor mental health episodes themselves. She would describe her marriage as being under constant strain at times, and her eldest daughter, Emily, who's now 12, who uses the hospice services, you know, she would really highlight 2 things that she feels really would have helped their family in some way, and she really wanted to raise awareness of that. And really what she has said is that free counselling for families and specifically parents. And as she's highlighted in her feedback, she's mentioned that her daughter's health and progress really changed month to month, year and year, and that in itself was like a constant grieving process, and as she described it, a living loss. And at times as individuals they had access counselling services, but that came with quite a high economic cost to the family, and she really feels that having those type of services that are accessible but also free would have really helped her family more throughout her journey. The other main point then that she highlighted was having more regular nursing support. So whilst Emily comes to Horizon House and receives supported short breaks, and they've also been fortunate to have had hospice at home shifts, Karen would highlight that marriages, partnerships, family relationships are really under extreme and constant pressure when there's the requirement for 24-hour care for a child in the household. And really what she has described is that the hospice has been really a fantastic location for their family, and in particular for the siblings, who can really spend that quality time with their sister. However, we are quite limited in terms of the frequency of supported short breaks that we can offer to children, I suppose because of the demand in our service. I know Aisling mentioned earlier we're a 10-bedded unit, but we're not actually commissioned to run 10 beds. So whilst we have that capacity there, we're not always running at that capacity because the funds aren't available or due to the demands on the service. So really what Karen was pointing out was having something more regular really would have benefited their family. So looking at the lessons we kind of learned as a service and as a team through COVID and how we responded, I thought about this a lot, and we've spent a lot of time as a team reflecting on this, as we all do as social workers. We're quite good at reflection, and we kind of grouped these into three main categories. And I suppose the first thing for me that really stood out was around the idea of having greater flexibility in service delivery. And I think this is probably quite relevant to a number of services out there. And this new flexibility includes, but isn't limited to, some of the things I've mentioned there on the list. So development of online work. We're quite fortunate in that we're a funded project at the minute. So really funding and resources in terms of the family support service wasn't restricted. So we were able to kind of move services online quite quickly with the support of senior management, which was great because, as Aisling has already mentioned as well, it allowed us a level of freedom in terms of, working out what would actually benefit and support families during this really difficult time. We also introduced a care at home model. We looked at PPE and how to adapt that. And then also, obviously, we're talking about being health and social care social workers, so safeguarding was also a key priority for us. So just to give you a bit of a flavour of how we developed our online work, I do have a video to show. As I say, I probably will have to cut some of it just because of time, but it should hopefully give you a good insight into how we've really developed working online with children and young people and families.
The first time we used in our group sessions by students or siblings, and also we use the first primary one-on-one work that we do with some of our siblings on a weekly or monthly basis. So as you can see, all the items that we see in the room in the background.
Julie, the sound's cracking up at my end.
And in this section, we'd like to check in with
Julie,
friends. So
can you?
Yeah.
Can you stop the film? Sorry, Julie, I don't know about anybody else, but I had a lot of interference. So maybe it's not playing very well.
Okay.
Maybe if you
I'm
give
not
me
sure
the
why
link,
that is.
I can send the link out when I'm sending some information out.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll maybe just skip the videos then if there is interference, because I'm not sure why that is my end. Okay. Yeah. So I suppose in lieu of getting to watch the video, really as a team we attended training around creating virtual play therapy spaces and rooms using various different platforms. So that was Donna talking us through basically how to do that using PowerPoint and using things like hyperlinks. And really that has enabled us to take our online work with children and young people to a new level, a level that's more engaging and appealing to them, that's more interactive, you know, gives them more choice. We've really seen the benefit of that. So I suppose we have kind of moved from just purely using things like Zoom for dialogue to really trying to tailor our service quite specifically to the young people that we work with and really given that focus and attention to really good person-centered and child-centered practice. So hopefully you'll get an opportunity to watch that video then at a later point. So some of the other ways that we worked online then was we made good use of our Facebook support group that we have for families, and that's a private group that has very set terms and conditions around it. And you know, we focused on various different types of videos, so ranging from kind of live interactive videos where the children got involved in music therapy and things, to producing pre-recorded sessions that families could watch at a time that suited them. And then we also looked at producing psychoeducational videos around things that families were really bringing to us, you know, in terms of mental health, and also then in terms of anxiety, and specifically anxiety for children at home, given the challenges they were facing not attending school. We also held our annual Forget Me Not service virtually as well, which is a service that we hold every year, inviting bereaved families up to Horizon House really to reflect and remember their children. So I will just skip past this because this is another video, but it's really just an example of one of the videos that we produced in terms of one of the kind of art activities. So this was one of the pre-recorded sessions, and the children were able to then do this activity at home with their families, and then they sent us in some lovely photographs of finished products and just commented on how beneficial they found that. So this is just a picture of young Riley with his multi-sensory board completed, and as you can see, he has thoroughly enjoyed that. So another thing then that we looked at was kind of adapting PPE. I suppose for a lot of our children, particularly at the beginning of lockdown, PPE was something that was quite unfamiliar to them, and at times intimidating, distressing, and quite clinical. So we really had to think about, you know, obviously we couldn't get away from wearing PPE in terms of maintaining safety and in terms of PHA guidelines. But we did look very quickly and very early on at, again, how we can make that child-centered. So as you can see with the visors, you know, we would have looked at what the child's interest was and tried to adapt those in a way that would make them more friendly and interesting, rather than being a barrier as such. And then we also created things that we could potentially hang from our chest that would act as nearly a distraction technique, because we did have some children who, because they're quite sensory, would have been pulling at visors and masks, and obviously because of the safety issues we needed to try and kind of redirect their focus and attention. So we come up with quite creative ideas, and I know that a lot of other organisations and the hospitals looked at this and probably adapted similar ways of working. You can see once we get over the initial fear of feeling like we were in our pajamas, we also would have worn quite colourful and bright scrubs, again, just to inject that kind of child-centred, family-friendly atmosphere here in Horizon House, because that's what's really important. And then obviously we, through the use of our resources and toys, so you can see we have our little dog here who's called Amber, also having her COVID mask on. So again, we were able to kind of use props and resources as a way of introducing the PPE to some of the children who were having difficulty with that. So one of the other kind of adaptations then that we made during COVID was the care at home model. So at the beginning of the very first lockdown, all our nurses were redeployed to adult hospice. So we were physically closed for families with regards to supported short breaks, and only remained open for end of life and care after death support. So, and obviously we were very aware of the challenges that the pandemic was causing our families, and many family support packages changed or fell through for various different reasons, or they had started to use their direct payments in different ways. For maybe their direct payment cares were maybe running practical errands for them rather than providing hands-on care. So really quite quickly we developed the care at home model, which enabled our nurses then to go out to families' homes really to provide that hands-on care. And that's quite unique because it's a bit different to our hospice at home service in that we were able to deliver that in all the trust areas. Our hospice at home service is contracted by certain trusts and is used mainly for children who require high level care in the community or who are end of life. So the care at home model really didn't have the same eligibility criteria to it. It really was, if a family needed it, then we provided that nursing support to help them with the challenges of COVID. So in terms of safeguarding then, this was really a key focus for us, and we maintained a very proactive approach to safeguarding despite the challenges COVID brought. And really that was driven by some of the concerning reports that come out from SBNI around the noticeable drop in child protection referrals during lockdowns, which really wasn't all that surprising considering school closures. But I think the main concern was that children weren't visible to services because a lot of services had either moved online or were still figuring out how they were going to deliver services, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic. But we were quite quick to adapt and to change, and I suppose there was still a heavy element for us in terms of eyes on in families' homes, and we work very well together as a multidisciplinary team. So and I suppose because we moved quite quickly online and developed the skills and knowledge in terms of use of the various online platforms, despite not being able to get into families' homes, we still have access to them to some degree, face to face, and also to, I suppose, the home environment and things like that. And we were at the forefront of picking up some quite significant safeguarding issues then as a result of our approach, and I'm quite proud of that, considering that it's a key component to our profession and obviously what we do here in terms of the team. So the second kind of main thing then in terms of lessons learned from COVID was around how intelligence or information is used and gathered. And I think a year on from COVID, I think we could all agree that out of necessity, we all really accept that there are new ways to communicate, and that will be essential going forward. So there isn't really this idea of reverting back to business as usual entirely. Yes, there are pros and cons to working virtually and working online, but we have found it a particularly useful way in terms of continuing to gather the views of families, and that has really been facilitated through the online platforms. And essentially what that is, it's about co-production, and really in essence that's about power sharing and continuing to ensure that families and service users are involved and included in influencing and developing services. because we really want that to be at the forefront of what we do to ensure that the service is actually beneficial. And essentially, we can't have a responsive or individualised service without that greater trust that co-production brings. So I know that a balance has to be struck with that, but it is really important that we continue to seek the views of families and gain their feedback, despite the challenges that we might face, because it would have been quite easy during the pandemic to just get bogged down in all the challenges that we faced as staff and as organisations and actually forget about why we're here and who the service is for. So we really made a very concerted effort to continue to reach out to families to check that what we were doing was working and having an impact and actually beneficial for them. And I suppose just to highlight that point, this was some feedback that we received from Riley's mum in particular, a lady called Louise. So I'll just read this out quite quickly for you. So she just said, I just wanted to write a message to you all to say how impressed I've been at the continued support we've received during these last few months. The creativeness that has been shown is amazing, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you all to come out of your comfort zone. Having to rethink everything and how you're going to deliver the much needed valuable services and support. I'm not sure on the overall response to the remote sessions, but they have been very much greatly received in our household. We have thoroughly enjoyed the music sessions, story times, arts and crafts, and videos and Zoom calls, and I appreciate the links to relevant services and phone calls to check up on us to make sure we're doing okay. It would be easy to simply wallow in self-pity, lose motivation to do anything other than the bare minimum during a time that is so frightening and uncertain. The virtual support has created structure into our week and provided me with motivation into getting up and dressed, knowing we are going to do something productive and that we all might enjoy. I would like to highlight that possibly after all this pandemic is over, that there may be a need to continue some services remotely. It's all trial and error now in terms of what works and is successful. But personally, from someone that is generally quite isolated from society due to my son's complex health issues, having some of these activities would greatly help, especially during the winter time when going out and about isn't an easy option. You're all doing an amazing job, and I look forward to future ideas and support. The team is making a huge difference in improving the overall health and well-being of my family and other complex needs families in the wider community. And I think in essence, that just highlights the importance of that flexibility in service delivery and the things that we have learned in terms of opportunities to move forward with a more hybrid model of service delivery. And, you know, it was wonderful to get such feedback because it really just affirmed that how we adapted actually worked for families, which is what's most important. So the third and final thing then really in terms of lessons learned from COVID was around who should deliver care and who should benefit from it. So I'm sure most of you looking at the icons will know what those are. And those online platforms are platforms that we have used quite often. And I suppose pre-COVID, these aren't typical means of communicating that we would have thought about using. And they're not platforms that you would automatically associate with health and social care. So I think that highlights the need to kind of be creative, think outside the box, and to try and make use of these, obviously whilst maintaining safety and security online in terms of how we work with families. And again, there's just a few quotes in terms of how that has benefited our families. So one parent saying that Zoom took away the pressure from meeting people actually face to face. You know, in person, you might only talk to people either side of you, but on Zoom, you get the opportunity to interact with many more children. And another parent then was really highlighting that the use of online platforms overcame a number of barriers for her in terms of organising childcare or just physically leaving the house and the practicalities around that. And finally, I just want to end just with a few more kind of quotes in terms of feedback from families, generally about the service and how we adapted during lockdown and how I suppose that really benefited them. And I'll just leave you to kind of read the two quotes yourself there. And then the final one, was around some of the one-to-one work then and the group work that some of the siblings had received. And that really brings the presentation element to a close. Thank you so much for your patience. Apologies for the slight technical errors. We did do a run through and everything worked perfectly, but the joys of the joys of technology. And obviously you'll have the opportunity to go back and look at the videos in full if you wish to do that. So I suppose we probably have a few minutes just to take any questions if anyone would like to ask myself or Aisling or other members of the team something in particular.